You have felt it since you were a child. A quiet, unshakable knowing that you are operating on a different frequency than the people around you. While others seemed perfectly content to follow the standard script of life, clocking in, blending in, and chasing the weekends. You have always carried a heavy, unexplainable weight in your chest, a sense of profound potential. For a long time, you may have thought something was wrong with you. You might have felt like a perpetual outsider, watching the world through a pane of glass, wondering why the things that satisfy everyone else leave you feeling so incredibly empty. Society has a way of trying to shame, numb, or distract that feeling out of you, labeling it as restlessness, dissatisfaction, or even arrogance. But it is not arrogance. It is the hallmark of a divine calling. You are waking up to the reality that you are a chosen one, and that restless weight you carry is the gravitational pull of your true purpose. To understand this awakening, you have to separate the concept of a calling from the hollow ambitions that modern culture worships. We are constantly conditioned to measure our worth by the metrics of hustle culture, acquiring fame, accumulating fast money, climbing corporate ladders, and projecting a flawless image of success. But as a chosen one, you have likely found that whenever you try to run that specific race, your spirit completely rejects it. That is because ambition is entirely about what you can extract from the world to elevate yourself. A calling, however, is about what you are meant to pour out into the world to elevate others. Your purpose was never going to be found in superficial milestones or material hoarding. It is rooted in a deep, undeniable desire to serve, to heal, and to disrupt the toxic cycles that have held people captive for generations. You are not here to blindly conform to a broken system. You were placed here to help build a new one. If you are feeling the stirring of this awakening but still feel blinded to your exact path, the answer is not found by simply looking at what makes you happy. The answer is found by looking at what breaks your heart. Your deepest frustrations are not random. They are divine indicators. I want you to take a moment to pause and ask yourself what specific injustice, what silent pain, or what brokenness in this world you simply cannot stand to witness. Leaves, what is the one thing you look at and think that someone needs to step up and fix this? That anger, that profound empathy, that specific heartbreak is your compass. It is pointing directly toward the very assignment you were sent here to complete. When you stop running from the weight of your calling and finally turn to face the exact pain you are meant to heal, the confusion will lift, and your awakening will finally translate into undeniable action. For a long time, you have looked back at the chapters of your life and wondered why your path had to be so exceptionally difficult. You have endured seasons of profound isolation, silent struggles that no one else saw, and betrayals from the very people you trusted most. In the darkest of those nights, it is natural that you questioned if you were cursed, if you had done something wrong, or if you had simply been forgotten by the universe. But as a chosen one, you must completely redefine how you view your struggle. The pain and the prolonged periods of being hidden away were never a divine punishment, nor were they a streak of bad luck. They were a necessary crucible. You were placed into the wilderness. In the wilderness, all superficial distractions are stripped away, and the ego is burned down to its core so that something far more resilient can be built in its place. You were not buried during those years of silence. You were planted. If you look closely at history and spiritual wisdom, you will see that this wilderness season is a mandatory prerequisite for anyone destined for a massive calling. Before David ever wore a crown or defeated a giant, he spent years in the lonely, unseen fields tending to sheep, fighting off predators in total obscurity. Before Nelson Mandela could dismantle an entire system of oppression and lead a nation to healing, he spent decades confined to a quiet, isolated prison cell. The greatest leaders, healers, and cycle breakers do not emerge from lives of unbroken comfort. They are forged in the dark. A tree that is meant to withstand hurricane winds must first spend years growing its roots deep into the cold, unseen earth before it ever produces fruit in the light. Your isolation was the soil where your spiritual roots were desperately trying to anchor themselves. You were being kept out of the spotlight because you were not yet ready for the specific spiritual warfare and heavy responsibility that comes with your true assignment. This brings us to the profound reality of how endurance is actually built. When we often pray for strength, wisdom, and resilience, expecting them to be magically downloaded into our minds like a sudden gift. But the universe does not simply hand you strength. It gives you opportunities to be strong. It provides resistance. The psychology of resilience dictates that a muscle only grows when it is subjected to tension, stress, and micro tears. Your past was not a series of pointless tragedies. It was a highly specific, custom-designed training ground meant to build the exact endurance muscle you will need for your future. The calling on your life carries an immense weight of influence and spiritual power. If you had been handed that blessing before your character was strong enough to carry it, the weight of it would have completely crushed you. Every tear you cried in private, every betrayal you had to forgive, and every time you had to pick yourself back up off the floor when no one came to save you, you were building the internal architecture required to sustain the massive destiny that is preparing to find you. If you have been feeling disconnected from your calling, you must understand that the divine voice has not stopped speaking to you. Rather, the world around you has simply become deafeningly loud. We are living in an era where your attention is the most heavily hunted resource on the planet. This goes far beyond a vague warning to keep your eyes open for signs. There is an active, calculated war being waged on your focus every single minute of the day. Algorithms, doom scrolling, the relentless news cycle, and the exhausting demands of modern hustle culture are not just modern inconveniences. They are actively weaponized tools designed to keep you in a state of perpetual anxiety and spiritual numbness. When your mind is constantly flooded with cheap dopamine hits and synthetic urgency, you lose the ability to hear the quiet, steady frequency of your own intuition. The systems of this world are entirely content to watch you scroll away your destiny, trading the massive impact you were meant to have for the fleeting comfort of digital distraction. You must begin to treat your focus not as a mental habit, but as a profound spiritual discipline. Attention is the actual currency of your soul. Whatever you consistently give your attention to is what you are actively worshiping and empowering in your life. If you spend hours a day consuming fear, outrage, and the highlight reels of other people, you are actively funding your own spiritual paralysis. As a chosen one, your assignment requires a level of clarity and vision that cannot coexist with constant noise. The universe will not shout over the chaos of your life. It speaks in the stillness. It speaks in the gaps between your thoughts. If you never create space for silence, you are effectively hanging up the phone on the very guidance you have been desperately praying for. Defeating this distraction is no longer a matter of mere productivity. It is a matter of spiritual survival, and you must ruthlessly guard the gates of your mind against anything that seeks to dilute your divine focus. To reclaim your power, you must implement a radical disruption to your daily routine by instituting a daily technological blackout. This is not a casual suggestion to turn your phone face down while you watch television. It is a mandatory practice of total separation from your screens and external input for at least 30 unbroken minutes every single day. You have to physically step away from the artificial noise and teach your nervous system how to tolerate the initial discomfort of true silence. At first, your mind will race, panic, and search for its usual distractions. But you must sit through that withdrawal. As you commit to this daily quiet, the mental fog will begin to dissipate, and your spiritual awareness will finally be able to boot up. In that sacred, undisturbed space, the answers that have been eluding you will rise to the surface, and you will finally hear the exact instructions you need to step fully into your power. For a long time, you have been told to simply follow your heart, trust the universe, or look for feelings of peace when making significant decisions about your life and your calling. But as a chosen one, you have likely realized that this vague advice is entirely insufficient when you are standing at a major crossroads, feeling the paralyzing weight of a choice that will alter your destiny. The reality is that your heart can be deceitful. Your emotions can be manipulated by fear, and what feels like peace in the moment might actually just be the temporary relief of avoiding a necessary, difficult path. You cannot build a legacy on the shifting sands of good vibes. You need a concrete, actionable framework for discernment, so that you are not constantly second-guessing yourself or being led astray by your own unhealed anxieties, wishful thinking, or the loud opinions of the world. Discernment is not a mystical, elusive feeling that randomly descends upon you. It is a spiritual skill that you must actively cultivate and refine. When you are faced with a decision that carries the weight of your purpose, you must run it through a rigorous 3-part test to ensure it is truly the divine voice speaking to you. First, you must ask yourself if the opportunity or direction aligns with universal truth and your own deeply held core values. Does it require you to compromise your integrity, shrink your authenticity, or manipulate others to succeed? If it violates the fundamental principles of light and truth, it is a distraction, regardless of how glittering or lucrative it appears. Second, you must evaluate the nature of the peace it brings. Does this decision bring a long-term and deep-seated peace in your spirit, even if it causes acute short-term fear or discomfort in your flesh? Often, the divine path is terrifying because it requires massive growth. But beneath the fear, there is a bedrock of quiet knowing. If the path only offers immediate gratification but leaves a lingering, heavy unease in your gut, it is the wrong door. Finally, you must look at the fruit of the decision by asking if the wise, grounded, and spiritually mature mentors in your life agree with the direction. While you must ultimately follow your own calling, divine instruction rarely operates in total isolation from the wisdom of those who have already walked through the fire. To master this framework, you must also learn to differentiate the psychological frequency of anxiety from the spiritual frequency of intuition. This is where most chosen ones stumble, mistaking their own panic for a divine warning. Anxiety is loud, chaotic, and desperately urgent. It feels like a rushing wind in your chest, screaming at you to act immediately out of fear, scarcity, or the desperate need to control an outcome. It is a reactive state that thrives on worst-case scenarios and worst-case timelines. Divine intuition, however, operates on an entirely different wavelength. It is a quiet, steady, and persistent knowing that resides deep in your gut. It does not shout, and it rarely demands panicked, immediate action. It simply waits for you to quiet the noise long enough to hear its gentle instruction. When you learn to silence the screaming of your anxiety and tune your spirit to the calm frequency of that inner knowing, you will move forward with an unshakable confidence, entirely secure in the knowledge that you are finally hearing the divine voice with total accuracy. As you step further into the calling placed upon your life, you will inevitably collide with one of the most painful and misunderstood realities of spiritual growth, which is the absolute necessity of relational pruning. Elevation requires separation. When you commit to breaking generational curses and pursuing a higher purpose, your internal frequency fundamentally shifts, and the people around you will feel it. Suddenly, conversations that used to fulfill you will feel incredibly draining, and environments where you once belonged will start to feel suffocating. This is not because you have become arrogant or because you suddenly think you are better than anyone else. It is simply the friction of outgrowing your container. The harsh truth is that leveling up spiritually and personally means some friends, peers, and even family members will no longer fit into the next chapter of your life. The universe will begin to violently prune away relationships that are tethering you to old versions of yourself. And this process can leave you feeling profoundly isolated, misunderstood, and entirely alone. To survive the sheer loneliness of this elevation, you must begin to view the people in your life through the lens of seasonal versus lifetime assignments. Not everyone who started the journey with you is equipped or intended to cross the finish line by your side. Some relationships are like the scaffolding around a building under construction. They were completely necessary to help you survive a specific season, to teach you a vital lesson, or to support you when you were weak. But once the building is structurally sound, leaving the scaffolding up actually prevents the architecture from serving its true purpose. You have to recognize that holding onto a seasonal relationship long past its divine expiration date only creates resentment, stagnation, and a delay in your destiny. You cannot drag someone up a mountain if they are fiercely committed to staying in the valley. Letting go of these connections is not an act of malice or betrayal. It is an act of mutual liberation, freeing both of you to walk the paths you are actually meant to walk. Navigating this transition requires you to master the art of setting boundary lines with profound grace. You have to learn how to lovingly release toxic or stagnant relationships without harboring any bitterness in your heart. This means you stop over-explaining your evolution to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you silently reclaim your energy and redirect it toward your purpose. By actively clearing out the spaces in your life that are occupied by the wrong people, you create an energetic vacuum. The universe abhors a vacuum, and it will quickly rush to fill that newly cleared space with high-value, spiritually aligned mentors and peers who operate on your new frequency. You must be willing to sit in the temporary discomfort of an empty room so that the right people finally have the space to walk through the door. Embrace the pruning. Just because the isolation you feel right now is simply the divine preparation of the soil for the massive relational harvest that is coming. It is entirely impossible to step into the massive calling on your life while you are still quietly bleeding all over the people you are meant to lead. For years, you may have tried to outwork, outrun, or spiritually bypass the deep traumas of your past, believing that if you simply focused entirely on your future, the pain would eventually fade away. But unprocessed trauma does not simply evaporate. It retreats into the basement of your subconscious, where it actively lifts weights, growing stronger and manifesting as an invisible force that dictates your daily choices. This is why you might find yourself sabotaging relationships, shrinking in rooms where you belong, or blowing up incredible opportunities right as you approach the finish line. The unhealed parts of your heart are terrified of the exposure that comes with elevation. As a chosen one, you are required to stop running and finally confront the shadows you have been avoiding. You must shine a blinding light on the brokenness, the abandonment, and the betrayals. Because the exact places where you have been broken are the exact places where your greatest spiritual authority is going to be forged. Confronting this pain requires you to step completely out of the seductive trap of the victim mentality. What happened to you in your past was likely deeply unfair, cruel, and entirely out of your control. It is incredibly comfortable to wrap yourself in the blanket of victimhood because it validates your pain and absolves you of the overwhelming responsibility to change. However, living as a permanent victim will completely neutralize your divine purpose. Being a chosen one demands a posture of extreme ownership over your own restoration. It is absolutely not your fault that you were traumatized, but it is now entirely your responsibility to heal. You have to realize that the universe is watching to see what you will do with the pain you were handed. Will you let it define your limitations, or will you use it as the raw material to build your empire? When you take radical accountability for your internal state, you stop waiting for an apology that is never coming, and you start actively building a future that your past cannot touch. Your wounds are no longer evidence of your defeat. They are the highly specific curriculum required for your ultimate assignment. The final and most difficult step in this transformation is the profound alchemy of true forgiveness. Modern culture often misrepresents forgiveness as a soft, passive concession to the person who abused or betrayed you, making it feel like you are letting them off the hook. In reality, forgiveness is a radical, aggressive severing of spiritual chains. When you harbor deep resentment and rage, you remain energetically tethered to the person who hurt you, allowing them to continuously siphon your precious life force years after the actual event has ended. Forgiving them does not mean you validate their actions, excuse their behavior, or ever invite them back into your life. When it simply means you are making the conscious decision to stop drinking poison while waiting for the other person to die. It is the act of pulling the knife out of your own back so the wound can finally close. By cutting that heavy, bitter anchor, you reclaim all of your stolen energy. You are then able to take the healed scars of your past and wield them as divine weapons of empathy, resilience, and unshakable authority, to free others who are trapped in the exact same darkness. There is a profound spiritual law concerning wealth, time, and influence that is consistently overlooked by those who are desperately praying for a massive breakthrough. The universe does not arbitrarily hand over millions of dollars, vast platforms, or incredible opportunities to individuals who have absolutely no capacity to manage the small things already in their possession. It is a fundamental truth that you will never be trusted with a kingdom if you cannot even manage a village. The illusion of overnight success or sudden, unearned blessings is a toxic narrative that sets chosen ones up for inevitable failure. If you are praying for elevation, but your daily life is characterized by chaotic spending, chronic lateness, and emotional exhaustion, you are actively blocking your own blessings. True stewardship is the divine prerequisite for true abundance. It is the unglamorous, daily discipline of proving that you can be trusted with the raw materials of your life. Before you ask for more, you must meticulously examine what you are currently doing with what you already have. When it comes to the specific cultural traps of the American audience, breaking the cycle of consumer debt and financial bondage is not just a matter of practical advice. It is a spiritual mandate. You cannot effectively walk in your divine calling if you are constantly anxious about making minimum payments on things you bought to impress people you do not even like. Consumer debt is a modern form of slavery that drains your creative energy, limits your geographic and career freedom, and forces you to say yes to opportunities you should be turning down simply because you are desperate for a paycheck. As a chosen one, your financial stewardship requires you to live ruthlessly below your means, prioritizing your ultimate purpose over the instant gratification of a lifestyle you cannot afford. You must learn to view money not as a tool for status, but as a seed for your assignment. Furthermore, when you combine this discipline with the spiritual power of radical generosity, giving strategically and cheerfully, even when it feels uncomfortable, you break the stronghold of scarcity in your mind and align yourself with the limitless provision of the universe. However, true stewardship extends far beyond your bank account. It is arguably even more critical to master the stewardship of your physical and emotional energy. Your energy is the literal fuel for your calling, and yet you likely give it away freely to people and situations that offer absolutely no return on investment. If you are constantly engaging in petty arguments, scrolling through toxic comment sections, or overcommitting to obligations out of a desperate need to please others, you are hemorrhaging the very life force required to build your legacy. You must become fiercely protective of your inner atmosphere. You have to identify the energy vampires in your life, the people, habits, and environments that leave you feeling depleted, anxious, or fundamentally less than. And you must set boundaries of steel against them. When you steward your energy with the same meticulous care that a billionaire stewards their investments, you ensure that you always have a profound reserve of power available to execute the divine assignment on your life with absolute excellence. You have spent enough time waiting for a sudden surge of inspiration to change your life. The truth is that motivation is a fleeting, unreliable emotion, but discipline is entirely divine. Many people who feel a profound calling make the critical mistake of believing their destiny will simply arrive on a silver platter, delivered by a sudden stroke of cosmic luck or a momentary burst of willpower. But you cannot sustain a chosen life on the back of chaotic, reactive daily habits. Grand visions and massive spiritual shifts do not happen in the abstract. They are forged in the unglamorous reality of a Tuesday morning. If your daily routine consists of waking up exhausted, immediately grabbing your phone, and rushing out the door in a state of panic, you are actively giving away the architectural control of your life to the demands of the world. A massive calling requires an unshakable foundation, and that foundation is built brick by brick through the highly intentional habits you practice when absolutely no one is watching. The architecture of your entire day is determined by how you construct your first waking hour. The moment you open your eyes, your mind is in a highly suggestible, programmable state. If you immediately flood your brain with the anxieties of your inbox, the outrage of the news cycle, or the endless demands of other people, you permanently set your spiritual frequency to defense mode for the next 24 hours. As someone carrying a heavy, divine assignment, you can no longer afford to live on the defensive. You must take radical ownership of your morning, treating those early moments as sacred, protected territory that belongs exclusively to your spiritual growth. By anchoring your morning in deliberate stillness rather than immediate stress, you dictate the energetic rhythm of your day. This ensures that you step out into the world operating from a place of deep, grounded authority rather than frantic, scattered survival. To actually build this architecture, you must commit to a non-negotiable daily sequence before you ever interact with the outside world. Begin with 10 dedicated minutes of total silence, utilizing prayer, meditation, or simply grounding your breathing to center your spirit. This is not the time to rapidly ask the universe for favors. It is the time to quiet your ego and align your frequency with truth. Follow this silence by physically writing down 3 highly specific things you are genuinely grateful for. A practice that actively rewires your neurological pathways out of a scarcity mindset and directly into an abundance frequency. Finally, before the trivial chaos of the day can begin, identify the single most important task that actually moves the needle on your divine purpose. Make a quiet vow to complete that one specific action above all the meaningless busywork that will inevitably vie for your attention. When you consistently stack these intentional, disciplined mornings back to back, you stop merely dreaming about your calling, and you begin physically constructing the destiny you were chosen to build. There is a paralyzing trap that ensnares almost every chosen one at the precipice of their greatest breakthrough, and that trap is the illusion of perfectionism. You have likely convinced yourself that you are simply being responsible, waiting for the perfect timing, the exact right resources, or a flawless blueprint before you finally step out into your calling. But you must recognize that perfectionism is not a virtue. It is a trauma response wearing a very convincing disguise. It is the terrified inner child trying to control every possible variable to avoid the pain of criticism, rejection, or failure. When you demand absolute certainty and 100% clarity from the universe before you are willing to move, you are no longer walking in faith. Waiting for perfect conditions is actually a subtle form of disobedience. You are demanding that the divine prove itself to you before you prove your willingness to obey. Your calling does not require a flawless execution. It requires the raw, vulnerable courage to take messy, imperfect action in the very face of your deepest fears. You have to understand the profound spiritual mechanic of how divine provision actually works. The path will never be entirely illuminated while you are standing safely on the porch of your comfort zone. Think of the ancient stories of miraculous crossings, where the waters never part while the people are safely standing on the dry banks. The miracle only activates when they have the audacity to step directly into the rushing current. The bridge does not appear until your foot is already falling through the empty air. Divine provision, favor, and clarity will only ever meet you at the exact point of your action. If you stay on the shore waiting for the waters to recede before you commit to the journey, you will spend the rest of your life waiting. You must gather the courage to get your feet wet. You have to launch the project, have the difficult conversation, make the investment, or walk away from the toxic environment long before it feels safe or logical to do so. The momentum of your obedience is what commands the universe to align the necessary resources and open the doors that have remained stubbornly closed. As you begin to take this imperfect action, you must entirely dismantle your toxic relationship with failure. When you step into the unknown, you are going to stumble, make incorrect assumptions, and face moments of embarrassing defeat. But failure is not a permanent identity, nor is it a sign of divine rejection telling you to turn back. Failure is simply the acquisition of vital data. It is the universe providing you with immediate, necessary feedback to refine your strategy and harden your resolve. When you launch something that does not work or take a risk that falls flat, you have not ruined your destiny. You have successfully eliminated a route that was never meant for you, which is a massive victory of divine redirection. A chosen one does not succeed because they never make a mistake. They succeed because they refuse to let a mistake become a monument. Take the pressure off yourself to be perfect. Embrace the awkward, terrifying, and clumsy stages of your growth, knowing that your willingness to look foolish in the short term is exactly what secures your profound legacy in the long term. As you reach the culmination of this awakening, you must undergo the most profound paradigm shift of your entire journey. Moving your focus entirely away from the pursuit of individual success and stepping fully into a macro vision of your existence. For so long, the modern spiritual and self-help narrative has conditioned you to believe that the ultimate goal of being a chosen one is simply to manifest a comfortable life, acquire a beautiful home, drive a luxury car, or attain a state of uninterrupted personal peace. While the universe certainly desires abundance for you, reducing your divine calling to mere material acquisition is a tragic underestimation of your true assignment. Your purpose is not just about you. You were not sent into this specific family, this specific community, and this specific era of history merely to make yourself comfortable. You were sent here to be a cycle breaker. You are the designated disruption to a long line of dysfunction, trauma, and limitations that have quietly suffocated your lineage for decades, if not centuries. When you look back at your family history, you will undoubtedly see the recurring patterns of addiction, poverty, abuse, emotional unavailability, or chronic fear that have been passed down from generation to generation like a dark inheritance. Your parents and your grandparents likely did the absolute best they could with the tools they were given. But they were often fighting just to survive. They did not have the luxury, the awareness, or the spiritual capacity to turn around and actually defeat the giants that were chasing them. That is exactly why you are here. You are currently fighting the spiritual and emotional battles that your ancestors could not fight. The intense resistance, the heavy spiritual warfare, and the overwhelming pressure you have felt your entire life are not random. They are the desperate attempts of those generational curses trying to stop the one person who finally has the power to break them. When you heal your own heart, when you refuse to pass your unhealed trauma down to your children, and when you step into financial and spiritual sovereignty, you are not just saving yourself. You are literally rewriting the bloodline. Your victory echoes backward to redeem the pain of your ancestors and echoes forward to guarantee the freedom of your descendants. Knowing the massive weight of this generational mandate, you can no longer afford to play small, shrink in rooms where you belong, or apologize for the heavy calling placed upon your life. The time for hiding in the shadows of your own potential is officially over. The universe has equipped you with every ounce of resilience, intuition, and spiritual authority required to execute this assignment with excellence. You have survived the wilderness. You have learned to silence the noise of distraction. You have honed your discernment, and you have turned your deepest wounds into your most devastating weapons against the darkness. Now, you must make the conscious, unshakable decision to accept the mantle. Look directly at the fear, the doubt, and the heavy expectations of the world, and recognize that they have absolutely no power over a spirit that has been marked by the divine. Step forward today with the quiet, dangerous confidence of someone who knows exactly who they are and exactly what they were sent here to do. You are the chosen one, the cycle breaker, and the architect of a brand new legacy, and your time to rise is right now.